Welcome back to Patrick Musilek's Top 12 Albums of the Decade.
Number 4, These Hopeful Machines by BT.
These hopeful machines.
Yesterday, I spent quite a while talking about Immersion by Pendulum. And today we're here to talk about BT's album, These Hopeful Machines. To me, these two albums are so interlinked that it's hard for me almost to separate them in my head because they came out the same year, 2010, the first year that I started doing these lists of top 12, and the first year going back into the decade that we're talking about now. And at the time, back in 2010, my number one album of the year was Immersion by Pendulum. Now here we are 10 years later. Pendulum's my number 5 of the decade, but above it, at my number 4, is These Hopeful Machines by BT. So that tells you something. That tells you that over the last decade, either I've changed or I've grown to appreciate the music more. Obviously the music hasn't changed. But I think what ended up happening was I'm more able to appreciate These Hopeful Machines for the actual task that it tried to achieve. Whereas Pendulum's Immersion is sort of like a joy to listen to, even though I said it's very hardy, it's hard to listen to all the way through. You couldn't listen to BT's These Hopeful Machines all the way through. It'd be impossible. It's so impossible, in fact, that he released it as a 2-disc set. So there's 7 songs on the first disc, 7 songs on the second set. You have to change the disc in between. And I think that was done for a reason, other than just the fact that you couldn't fit all 14 songs onto one disc. But anyway, the songs on this album are long. I mean, they range from 7 minutes to 12 minutes. There's a few songs that are around the 5.5, 6 minute mark, making them a bit more normal length. But they all have this sort of stereotypical, standard structure to them, which is one of the things that I love about music. If you know me at all, you know that structure is a very important part in terms of determining how much I like something. All these songs on this album have verse, chorus, bridge, chorus, or something like that. Maybe a few extra pieces in there because some of the songs are so long. But these songs are constructed to be actual works of art. They start slow, they build, and then they have a moment to come down. And all that is reflected through the fact that BT has a degree in music from Juilliard's School of Music in 3 different categories: drumming, piano, and singing. So with those 3 elements, give those 3 elements to a man who is an absolute musical genius, and I do not say that lightly. People have referred to him as the modern-day Mozart. I don't know how accurate that is exactly, but he is absolutely a musical genius. And this album is the height of his musical genius. Nowadays, more modern times, BT is making music that I feel like is not being made for me. It's not structured the way that I enjoy music. And it goes over my head. It's not made for me. It's made for a different type of music listener. But These Hopeful Machines is filled with things that I love. Soaring vocals by both him and guest vocals. Every other song on the album is sung by a different person. And I think that again, like the same thing with Pendulum, that helps keep the album fresh to listen to, but it also makes it feel very hearty, makes it feel like a very full meal. I think that along with those soaring vocals, there's soaring moments of music. There are moments, a lot of the songs have a classical feeling to them, sort of like our number 11 with Evanescence, although that had a very in-your-face type of classical influence, of course, with the strings and everything. being a more classical structuring to the songs. This feels like classical music in the sense that every single piece, every single little tiny blip and bloop and vocal twist, vocal turn, every single little drop of a note, every single stab or attack of a note was thought out and planned out and put there on purpose. And that's something BT has always been known for. That's why people call him a musical genius, because he takes the time. He, I think, still holds to this day the Guinness Book of World Records, the record for the most edits done in a single song for his song Somnambulist, I believe, off of his album that came out a few albums before this one. But the thing that really makes these Hopeful Machines so special, apart from just the length and the sort of technicality of it, is the fact that the songs are all accessible. There are 12-minute songs on this album that I would show to anybody, and I don't think that the average person would become fatigued listening to it. I think the songs are longer because the sections of the songs are maybe a little bit stretched out. And because of that, it still feels like you're listening to a normal song. And that's, like I said, what really makes this album special. It's unique in its own ways, and it is, at the end of the day, electronic music. I think each of the two discs has one or two instrumental songs that's just a four-to-the-floor, almost house song, which is what BT is known for, bringing house music to the United States in the early to mid-'90s. And there are some songs like that, but there are some rock songs. BT gets to show his guitar on this album more than his guitar skills, more than any of his other albums in his catalog. And it's all these different elements that come together with such precision that really make it sort of a cut above some of the other stuff that's even on this list. And then the one last thing I want to mention about this album is the fact that nowadays music is mixed in such a way, you hear people talk about things being overcompressed a lot, the compression wars. And I feel like at this point, we're sort of on the tail end of that. We're coming down where not every artist feels like their music should be louder than the person they just heard on the radio. But the special thing about this album is that it was released in the heart of the compression wars. Everything was just being smashed to the roof. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, just Google compression wars and read the wiki article about it. It's very fascinating. But this album is extremely dynamic. You'll be listening to it, and it's not a very good album to listen to in the car while you're driving and there's a lot of ambient noise. This is the kind of album that you want to sit and listen to and enjoy in the quiet, because there are moments where you have to lean forward, you have to sit forward in your chair and try to strain to hear it. But then in that same song, 5 minutes later, you almost feel like you got to reach for the knob to turn it down because it's just so intense. And that's what makes this album just so incredible and just skyrockets it up. And that's something that I don't know if I was able to appreciate back in 2010. And so that's sort of an interesting thing to look back and see. I'm not saying that I am a more complicated music fan than I was back then, or that I understand a lot more about music than I did 10 years ago. I'd like to think that's the case. I'd like to think that I've grown a lot in terms of my musical tastes and things like that. But something like dynamics in a song is very hard to explain to the lay person. And if you're watching this video, you're not the lay person. You obviously care about music enough to watch this video, so you get what I'm talking about. But something like that can take an album and elevate it over the course of time with understanding is something that really should, I feel, at least I try to take the time to sit back and appreciate that kind of thing a little bit more. So that's BT, These Hopeful Machines. Go on YouTube, look up anything from that album, and I think you'll be really happy with it. As a sort of a bonus with this album, he also re-released the album twice. He released it in a much edited and cut down form that I don't care for as much, called These Humble Machines. And that's all 14 tracks mixed down so that they were shorter lengths, cutting out some of the sections so that they'd fit on one disc. And then also These Reimagined Machines. He released the album as a whole big set of remixes, a double disc set of remixes. So there's a lot of content to go with these 14 songs. And while I do appreciate these humble machines, definitely stick to These Hopeful Machines, because I think that's by far the better way to listen to these songs. Thank you very much for watching the video, and tomorrow we're going to peek into the top 3.
Thank you for watching the video. Thank you for
everybody, and welcome back to Patrick Musilek's 12 Albums of the Decade.
Top 12, but that's fine.
Well, that's what I said.
Try it again. Let's do it again.
Okay.
Natural.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to I messed up. You can't take a break. One clip.